He's the charity case of this family. My brother-in-law said it loud enough for the whole backyard to hear. Then he laughed, the kind of laugh that expects the room to follow. And the room did. My sister laughed. My mother laughed. Even my aunt, who I'd driven 2 hours to see, covered her mouth and smiled. I didn't move. I kept my hands wrapped around my glass of iced tea and looked at the string of patio lights overhead and thought, okay, my name is Leigh. I'm 29. I work in data infrastructure, which, to my family, means nothing. It sounds made up. It sounds like something you say when you don't have a real job. My sister married a man named Colin 4 years ago, and since then, Colin has become the unofficial scorekeeper of our family. He has opinions about everything. Who's doing well? Who isn't? Who made smart choices? Who didn't? According to Colin, I didn't. I quit a stable accounting job 3 years ago to join a small tech startup in Austin. I didn't tell my family the full details because there were contracts involved. NDAs, equity agreements, confidentiality clauses. What they saw was, I left a steady paycheck, moved to a city where I knew almost nobody, and stopped posting on social media. To them, that looked exactly like someone falling apart. So that's the story they told. My sister would mention it at holidays, always with that careful concern in her voice. Leigh's still figuring things out. My mother would add, she was always the one who did things the hard way. And Colin never bothered with concern. He just said whatever he wanted because he'd figured out early on that no one was going to stop him. That afternoon was my parents' anniversary party, 35 years. My mom had rented out their backyard professionally catering. A small bar, real glassware. My sister and Colin had helped organize it, which meant Colin had been talking about it for 3 weeks, like he personally built the Eiffel Tower. I drove up from Austin alone. I'd taken Friday off. I brought a card and a photo book I'd spent 2 weekends putting together, printing pictures from every decade of my parents' marriage, writing captions in my mother's favorite color of ink. I left it on the gift table without saying anything about it. That's how I do things. Quietly. Colin started in about an hour after the party began. He was on his 3rd drink, talking to my dad's college friends about investing. He does this, finds an audience and performs for them. I was standing near the food table, half listening, when he swept his arm out in my direction and said it. She's the charity case of this family. And then he explained it cheerfully to my father's friends. How I'd walked away from a good career. How my parents had to help me with my security deposit when I moved. How I'd gone off to find myself and was still, apparently, lost. My dad's friends smiled uncomfortably. One of them, a man I didn't recognize in his early 60s, wearing a gray blazer over a check shirt, wasn't smiling at all. He was looking at me. Not with pity, with something else, something careful. I noticed him noticing me. I looked away first. My sister touched my arm. He's just being Colin, she whispered, like that was an explanation, like that was supposed to make it land softer. My mother was laughing at something else by then. She hadn't heard, or she'd chosen not to. With my mother, sometimes it was hard to tell. I put my glass down and went to get more ice. Here is the thing about being underestimated by your family. It doesn't happen all at once. It accumulates. It's the small edits they make to your story over years until the version of you that exists in their minds barely resembles the person you actually became. Growing up, my sister Vanessa was the obvious success. Straight A's, debate team, full scholarship to a school my parents still mention at dinner. She married Colin, who works in commercial real estate and makes a point of telling you his square footage in the first 10 minutes of conversation. They have a house with a 3-car garage. My parents have been in that garage. They talk about that garage. I was the kid who read too much, changed my major twice, and took a job in my mid-20s that nobody could explain at Thanksgiving. I liked that. I liked being hard to summarize, but my family didn't like it. They needed to know where to file me. When I left the accounting firm, my manager pulled me into her office and told me she thought I was making a mistake. She was kind about it. She said I had potential there. I thanked her and gave my 2 weeks. The startup was called Meridian Systems. We built back-end data tools for financial compliance software, the kind of infrastructure that large institutions use to monitor transactions, flag anomalies, generate regulatory reports. Unglamorous work, technically, invisible work almost entirely, which suited me. I was the 4th employee. By the time I'd been there 18 months, we had a client list that included 3 regional banks and a mid-size insurance carrier. We were quiet about it. The founders preferred it that way. I preferred it that way. The NDA I signed covered specifics: client names, product details, revenue figures. It didn't cover my job title, but what was I going to say at Christmas? I'm the head of data operations for a fintech startup that will probably get acquired in the next 2 years? My family would have nodded politely and then Colin would have made a joke, so I said nothing. I said I was working in tech. My mother asked if that meant I fixed computers. I said kind of. She moved on. The man in the gray blazer found me by the dessert table about 40 minutes after Colin's speech. He introduced himself as Howard. He said he'd known my father since law school, which surprised me. My father never mentioned him. He asked what I did for work, the way people do at parties, expecting a short answer. I gave him the short version: data infrastructure. Austin startup. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "Which startup?" I told him. He set down his fork. "Meridian Systems," he repeated. "Yes." He looked across the yard toward Colin, who was still holding court near the bar, then back at me. Something moved across his face. Not surprise exactly. More like pieces falling into place. "How long have you been there?" he asked. 3 years in October. "And your title?" "Head of Data Operations." I paused. "Why?" He excused himself politely and walked toward the bar. I watched him go and felt something shift in my chest. Not dread, something closer to the feeling before a thunderstorm when the air changes and everything gets very still. I should explain something. 3 weeks before my parents' anniversary party, I'd been at a meeting in our Austin office. Our founders, both of them, were on a call with a group of investors and strategic buyers. I wasn't supposed to be on that call, but our head of legal was sick and they needed me to walk through the compliance documentation. One of the buyers on that call was a firm called Halcyon Partners. They were interested in acquiring Meridian's data infrastructure division, not the whole company, just the part I ran. The lead contact from Halcyon was named Howard Breck. I hadn't met him in person before that afternoon at my parents' party, but he had seen my name on every document. He had read my technical specifications, my operational reports, my compliance framework that 3 banks were using right now. He knew exactly who I was, and he had just watched my brother-in-law call me the charity case of my family. I didn't say anything for the rest of the party. I helped my mother with the cake. I talked to my aunt about her garden. I listened to my father give a toast that made my mother cry in the good way, the way she does when she's genuinely surprised by her own happiness. I took pictures. I didn't look for Howard. I didn't look for Colin. Near the end of the night, when people were starting to drift toward the driveway, I heard Colin say my name. He was talking to my father's friends again, the ones from earlier. He was explaining, still apparently because some people never stop, that I was the one they didn't have to worry about succeeding because some people just weren't built for it. I was standing 5 feet away. Howard was standing 3 feet behind Colin. Howard said, "I'm sorry, I don't think we've been introduced properly." Colin turned. He smiled the way he does when he senses an audience. "Colin Marsh," he said, extending his hand. "You know the family?" "I know Leigh," Howard said. "We've been in acquisition talks." Colin blinked. "Her company," Howard added, as if clarifying for a slow student. "We've been in talks to acquire the data division she runs. The valuation is," he paused, tilted his head slightly, "substantial." The word substantial landed in the way he intended it to, like a stone dropped into still water. My sister had come over. She was holding her wine glass and staring at me like I'd just spoken in a language she didn't know I'd learned. My mother appeared at the edge of the group. She looked at Howard, then at me, then back at Howard. Colin laughed. It was not his real laugh. "Well, that's Leigh never mentioned any of that?" "No," Howard said simply. "She wouldn't." I felt my heartbeat in my throat, but my face was calm. I had practiced calm a long time ago, back in all the years of smiling politely while Colin talked over me, while my sister explained my own life to people, while my mother said I was still figuring things out. You learn to keep your expression neutral. You learn to let silence do the work. I looked at Colin and I gave him the smallest, most level smile I had. He didn't know what to do with it. Howard excused himself to take a call. That left me standing with my family and the friends, and the question nobody wanted to ask out loud. My sister spoke first. Leigh. Just my name. Like she was testing whether it still worked. I signed confidentiality agreements, I said before she could ask. I couldn't talk about the specifics. I still can't fully. But you're being acquired, she said. The division I run is in late-stage talks, yes. Colin cleared his throat. Well, that's great. That's really, I was just joking earlier, you know that. I know, I said. I wasn't going to do the thing where I let him off the hook by pretending I hadn't heard, or that it hadn't stung, or that his 3 years of jokes had just evaporated because he got caught. I wasn't going to reassure him. I didn't say anything else. My father had drifted over. He was looking at me with an expression I hadn't seen him wear before, something between recognition and what I can only describe as the specific grief of realizing you miss something important. I didn't know, he said quietly. I know you didn't, I said. He nodded. He put his hand on my shoulder once briefly, and then he went to talk to Howard. My mother came and stood beside me. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, why didn't you tell us? I tried, I said. You told me I was doing things the hard way. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the lights in the backyard. I didn't mean. I know what you meant, I said. That's the thing. Colin found me by my car before I left. He'd had another drink. He was doing the thing he does when he's off balance, talking faster, filling space. Hey, I want you to know, I never actually thought Colin. He stopped. You've called me a charity case, a late bloomer, the one who took the scenic route. You've said in front of other people that I was the sibling they stopped worrying about because the expectations were lower. I kept my voice even. I'm not listing it to punish you. I'm listing it so you know that I remember. He had nothing ready for that. He was looking at his shoes. I'm not going to be someone you can use as a punchline anymore, I said. Not at holidays, not at parties, not in front of my parents' friends. That's done. That's fair, he said very quietly. I believed him, a little. Maybe. Or maybe he just knew when he'd lost the leverage he never should have had. I got in my car and I drove back to Austin in the dark. The acquisition closed on a Tuesday. I was in a glass conference room on the 14th floor of a building downtown, signing documents that had my name on every page. Not as an afterthought. Not as the quiet one, the hard way one, the one they stopped worrying about. As the person who'd built something real in the dark and hadn't needed anyone to believe in it until after it was already done. Howard shook my hand when it was finished. He said, You never once mentioned the family thing. It wasn't relevant, I said. He smiled. No, I guess it wasn't. My phone had 3 missed calls from my mother by the time I got back to my desk. I sat with them for a moment. Outside, the city was loud and ordinary and moving fast. All those lives going forward without asking permission. I called her back. She didn't lead with congratulations. She said, I've been thinking about what you said at the party. Okay. I don't think I understood what you were doing, she said. For the last 3 years, I don't think I tried hard enough to understand. It wasn't an apology. Not exactly. She's not built for the direct kind. But I'd known that for 29 years. I knew what this was. I know, Mom, I said. Are you happy? She asked. I watched a courier bike cut through the intersection below me, fast and certain. Yeah, I said. I really am. The next holiday was Thanksgiving. My sister and Colin came. Colin brought wine and made a point of asking about the new role. I'd moved into a senior position at Halcyon after the acquisition, leading a new internal division. He asked thoughtful questions. He didn't make any jokes. I noticed, and I said nothing about noticing. My mother had framed one of the photos from the anniversary party, the one I'd taken of her and my father near the lights, the one where they're laughing at something nobody else is in on. She'd put it on the mantel. When I saw it, she caught my eye from across the room and nodded, just once. I sat at the table with my family and passed the rolls and listened to my father tell the same story he tells every year about the time he got lost driving to their first apartment together, and my mother interrupted with the correct version. And everyone laughed the way you do when a story is so familiar it's become its own kind of love. Colin poured my wine without being asked. I thanked him. I meant it. Not because things were fixed. Not because 3 years of small cruelties could be undone over one Thanksgiving, but because at some point you decide what you want to carry and what you're willing to set down. I'd been carrying it long enough. The truth has a way of eventually taking up the right amount of space. Not too loud, not too small, just exactly the size it was all along. You don't have to announce it. You just have to stay patient long enough for everyone else to finally catch up to what you already knew. I used to think the hardest part was doing the work nobody could see, signing NDAs that meant I couldn't explain myself at Christmas dinner, watching Colin hold court in my parents' backyard while I stood quietly by the food table holding my iced tea saying nothing. I thought the silence was the price I paid for the life I was building. What I didn't understand then was that the silence was also the work. There's a kind of discipline in not defending yourself before the proof is ready, not because you're weak, but because you understand something about timing that other people don't. Colin needed an audience. He needed the laugh, the nod, the validation that came from putting someone smaller in their place. I didn't need any of that. I needed to get the next thing right. Those are two completely different orientations to the world, and they produce two completely different lives. What happened at that party wasn't luck. It wasn't fate stepping in to balance the scales. Howard was there because I had spent 3 years building something real enough that a firm like Halcyon came looking. He knew my name because I had written documentation thorough enough that someone serious wanted to stake money on it. The moment in that backyard, Colin's face draining, my sister going quiet, my mother looking at me like she was seeing me for the first time, none of that happened by accident. It happened because I had kept going on days when there was no applause, no recognition, no one in my corner telling me I was doing the right thing. That's the part I want to sit with. Not the acquisition, not the look on Colin's face, but the 3 years of Tuesday mornings when I showed up anyway, when I chose to be the kind of person who does careful work even when no one is watching. That choice, made over and over in small ways, is what made the outcome possible. You can call it character, you can call it integrity. I call it the only real currency that doesn't depreciate. I also think about what it took to stay sharp through all of it, to keep learning, keep thinking, keep refining the work even when my family's version of me had already been filed away as the one who didn't make it. Intelligence isn't just what you're born with. It's what you choose to develop when you could have coasted, when you could have taken the easier path, when the people around you had already decided your ceiling. I refused to accept their ceiling. That refusal was its own kind of education. And then there's the staying, the not quitting when the accounting firm felt safe and my startup felt like a gamble, the driving 2 hours to a party where I knew I'd be minimized because my parents' 35 years together still mattered to me regardless of how Colin spent the evening, the capacity to keep showing up with your whole self intact even when people have been chipping at it for years. I don't have a tidy word for that. Endurance, maybe. Or just the decision, made quietly every morning, that you are not going to shrink to fit someone else's story about you. Leigh didn't win because the universe decided she deserved it. She won because she built something worth acquiring, held her character steady when it would have been easier to snap, and kept her mind sharp in the dark. Those three things together, that's not a miracle. That's just what happens when you stop waiting for permission and start doing the work.